Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second virtual PEOF of 2023, Building the Bridge from Pharma to MedTech with Patient Engagement. We're excited to have you here today. We have a wonderful panel. We'll give a couple minutes for people to join, but in about 20 seconds, we'll kick off. Wonderful. We'll get started here. Again, welcome to the Patient Engagement Open Forum virtual session. For those of you who are joining us for the first time for a virtual session, it is a series of virtual and in-person events that we run where we work together as a community and a multi-stakeholder community towards building stronger patient engagement. The forum aims to provide a holistic perspective of patient engagement from the landscape actors who are driving patient engagement. And it's really focused on fostering collaboration amongst us as a community and driving the kind of co-creation that we feel is necessary to really break down the fragmentation that we often see in patient engagement work. So we're excited to have you here today. You're an important contributor to moving things forward in patient engagement. So thank you for your presence. Today's session has three real objectives as we try to advance patient engagement in MedTech. The first one is really to go a bit deeper and learn about some of the challenges and opportunities to advance patient engagement, particularly in the MedTech space. We'd also like to explore how we can translate some of the lessons learned in the medicine space to the MedTech space for patient engagement. So a lot has been accomplished in medicines that we think has the opportunity to advance and really rapidly accelerate the movement of patient engagement in MedTech. And then finally, there are some resources that are already available to advance patient engagement in MedTech. We want to share some of those with you so that you're aware of them. Some of them have been recently launched, so they may not be in your radar. So we'll take a moment to do that as well. Today's agenda is going to start off with a little bit of welcome and introductions. We have a wonderful panel that's joined us here to share some of their experience and insight. You'll meet them in just a second. And then we're going to have a great discussion with this panel about the path forward for patient engagement in MedTech. They have a lot of experience that they can bring to the table. But at the same time, this is a co-creation moment for us here in the PEOF. So in addition to hearing from these panelists during this discussion, we will have an opportunity for interactive dialogue and interactive engagement with you here as well. So I'll explain how we're going to do that in just a minute. But it will be a community dialogue for us as a group. We will take a moment, about 10 minutes, to share some of the resources that we're excited about in MedTech. And then we're actually going to come back to some of the ideas and comments that you've shared as a community and bring them back to the panel in what we call a co-creation session to go a little bit deeper on what you've shared with us. So your involvement is going to be very, very important. And then we'll wrap up and have some closing thoughts. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping rules. We do ask you all to be here, to be present, and to be engaged. It is a co-creation moment, so that engagement is what makes it exciting. It's really what drives the energy in the room. All the microphones will be muted, so you don't need to worry about interrupting us. Please provide your questions and comments and feedback in chat. You'll be able to provide them through another channel called Group Map, but we'll also have the Zoom chat channel open where we'll be watching any thoughts you may have for us. This session, as you may have noticed, is being recorded and will be shared with the group at the end of the session. So you'll have a chance to share it more broadly and also revisit the conversation that we had today. So let's make this interesting. Let's engage. I think it's a wonderful opportunity and we're excited to get going. So as an effort to just kick off, I'll do a quick intro of myself, and then I'd like to hand it over to my co-moderator, Paula, and the rest of the speakers, just to provide a quick intro on who they are and their backgrounds for this panel. So my name is Brian Goodman. I am a program director with the Synergist. working on PFMD. One of the programs that I focus on there is the MedTech working group, which is partly why I'm here today, involved in this conversation. Paula, let me hand it over to you.
Thank you, Brian. So I'm Paula Ray. I'm a senior manager in the National Institute of Health and Care Research, Applied Research Collaboration. And I've been working to support patient engagement for over 12 years now, and I've done a lot of work with PFMD, but also UPATI that we'll talk about later. So very grateful to be part of this session, and I will pass over to Jenny, please.
Yes, I just wanted to start thanking the PEOF for having me here. And my name is Jenny Christensen. I'm based in Sweden. I got my first chronic disease in '94, and since then I've been working patient advocacy and started off in a patient organization, tried to save the world from different angles, moved on from a patient organization to a global pharma company, working on the national, global, and the regional level with patient advocacy and patient relations. Went from that to a startup working on remote monitoring and self-empowerment. And right now I'm working on MedTech for Health as a project manager, and MedTech for Health is one of Sweden's 17 innovation programs funded by government. And we work on MedTech together with the startups, for instance. So that's me.
Hi, everyone. Sandra Sa. I'm working at Roche Diagnostics and leading patient experience and partnership. So basically my role here is to orchestrate patient engagement across the diagnostics organization and in very close connection with my colleagues from Roche Pharma. Well, I'm working in the industry for already 17 years, so with so many different roles. And then my passion for patient connections or direct connections started like 6 or 7 years ago when I was in business development and working a lot with looking for solutions for disease management solutions where patients or people at risk could use directly. So, and then this was a great opportunity for us to start tapping into this area for MedTech company, and it is really a pleasure to be here.
Hello, my name is Raj Trailer. I am the Global Senior Director with Edwards Life Sciences. I've been with Edwards for almost 1 year, so I'm relatively new to the medical device space, but I've been in the healthcare sector for over 20 years, primarily on the pharma side, doing a wide range of different responsibilities from sales and marketing to advocacy relations and government affairs and public policy. I'm really excited to speak with everyone today and kind of share in terms of some of the learnings from Edwards Life Sciences. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mandy Sandcooler. I'm with an organization called the Mended Hearts, and we're based in the United States. I'm the Field Services and Communications Director, and we work to support and educate and advocate on behalf of cardiovascular patients and their families. We have hundreds of groups and chapters around the country. I have the pleasure of working closely with those groups, their leaders, the volunteers, and the patients. And I've been with the organization for 11 years. So thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, all of you, for the intro. It's really a great panel. So appreciate your presentation or your participation here. So as I mentioned earlier, this is going to be a co-creation session as well as a panel discussion. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce those of you who haven't already seen it to a tool called GroupMap, which we're going to use for this purpose. We are going to use GroupMap to really engage with the audience, poll you on questions, and facilitate discussion. It is much easier to use a computer with GroupMap than a telephone. So if you have the option between a computer or a phone, we encourage you to use a computer. When you're prompted to get into GroupMap, and the prompt will come through a chat link that's going to be sent here in the chat session, which has just been added. Thank you, Daniela. You will have to enter your email address in order to get into GroupMap. But then once you do, you will have the opportunity to start an engagement process with us as a group. As it notes here, if if instructions do not appear on the top of your screen, you can click on the I in the top left-hand corner to get additional instructions. So with that said, as a basic intro, we're actually going to jump into GroupMap now. So I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague who's going to put GroupMap up on the screen for us. Fantastic, thank you. So we'll give people just a second here to join, but we're going to start off the session just to give you a taste of how GroupMap works and to collect a little bit of feedback about who's currently in this session. So we're going to start off with a poll, and we're asking you to try to self-identify what kind of group you're part of, what stakeholder group are you part of here. So we'll just take a minute or two for you to respond. It's hopefully a quick response. We have about 17 people, 18 people who've completed it by now. There's about 50 people in the room. So we'll wait till we get close to 50, and then we'll run over and we'll take a look at the results. There it is. So you guys can see this is live. We're up to about 21 people. We have a really wonderful collection of patients in the room, along with pharmaceutical companies, which is great. It really ties into the fact that this is a diverse audience and a diverse conversation that we'd like to have today. Great to see we have a number of medical technology companies as well, given the topic that we're addressing today. Let's see, we're up to about 24. A few researchers joining the group, which is wonderful. "26, we'll see how close we can get to 50. Great, we're up to about 28. So this is actually a wonderful representation of the kind of participation that we see in PEOF. So this is great to see. So thank you for this. We're now going to actually jump to the next screen, and I'm going to introduce to you the GroupMap we're going to be using throughout the panel discussion today. So in this GroupMap, which you can keep up on your screen during the discussion, we have 4 topics, and the questions that we're going to be asking the panelists today will be related to these 4 topics, or these 3 topics, and there's one catch-all bucket at the bottom. So they're basically how and why should we measure patient engagement in MedTech? It's an issue that's come up, and we're going to press the panelists to discuss this a little bit further. How do we build trust and awareness to move patients from being empowered in this space to actually becoming engaged? So again, a really interesting area for us to dig a bit deeper with the panel and with you as a community. And then who are the unique stakeholders in the medical device ecosystem? And how do patients engage with this unique environment, which may be a little bit different than the pharma space in some respects? So we'll dive into that a little bit further. And then we also have this catch-all, because we know there could be other areas of interest, topics or comments you'd like to have as a community, and you can add them into here for other topics or questions that we'll be addressing further. It should be noted that in addition to adding your comments during the panel discussion, there's an opportunity for you to like comments. So there's a great example happening live right now. If you click on the thumb button, the likes will actually help us identify which of the topics are most interesting. So when we come back to the panel at the end of the discussion, we'll be able to prioritize what we bring back to the panel for additional conversation. So this will stay open during the entire session. So please do jump in and feel free to get involved with ideas or comments. So with this as sort of an intro, we're now actually going to switch over, and we are going to get started with the panel itself. So the panel is going to be co-moderated by myself and Paula Ray. So we'll be switching off and asking questions of the panelists. And I'd love to start with the first question for you, Raj. And it's around in PE initiatives that you have been part of at Edwards or in other environments. What have you learned about how to engage with patients during your Patient Experience Day event in particular, which we've heard a bit about, and how the different perspectives of patients come out in that initiative?
Yeah, Brian, thank you so much for that question. So this past March, Edwards, we hold a patient experience day and a half where we bring and we welcome up to 50 patients as well as their caregivers onto our campus here in Irvine, California. The purpose is to kind of reinforce in terms of why patients are important to Edwards. So making sure that we're there, they understand that the purpose of them being there is to provide us insights. So we get those insights from a variety of different ways. The main one is around patient listening sessions. So we have the patients as well as their caregivers with a moderator to kind of ask questions in terms of like their patient journey as part of their experience with our devices. So in those patient listening sessions, we have a variety of different folks from Edwards in the room. So we have our engineers, our HR, our marketing, from a variety of different functions, so they can all learn in terms of what can we do better in terms of providing a positive patient experience from our patients. So we're hearing directly from those. We also provide an opportunity for our patients to meet the actual engineers and the sewers actually make their device themselves. So as you can imagine, this is a very emotional time for those patients that actually have that device in their chest to get a chance to meet the actual people that actually made those devices. So again, very passionate, emotional part of our experience and the patient's experience. And then the final thing is it has to do back to our employees in terms of making sure our employees at Edwards understand and have a strong value of why the work that they do is important. So some of the learnings that we hear from the patients is, at first, some of them may be a little skeptical. Why are you guys bringing us here? Why did you fly us to Southern California? What's in it for you? And they're also asking, why is everyone so happy? Why is everyone at Edwards so happy? After the first couple of hours, and then they start meeting all the different folks at Edwards, they understand the reason everyone's happy is because this is the one opportunity a year that we get a chance to hear directly from them. We actually take in and we really appreciate in terms of why we do what we do, what can we do better. So this patient focus is part of our, what we call our secret sauce in terms of why we think that it's important, from our senior leaderships down to the last person that works in our catering office here in the office. So it's a great learning opportunity. Something we also not just have here in Irvine, but we also try to duplicate it around the rest of the world at all of our different sites. So we have these patient events around the globe. So this is part of kind of our Edwards culture. We also, at the end of the patient experience, we don't just leave it in the 1 day or day and a half an event and just stop there. By collecting all these different insights, we sit there, we analyze it. We have a whole team of folks, our on patient engagement team, that gather those insights, collect them, and make sure we share with our other colleagues within Edwards. So after the event, we go back, we analyze it, we look, the engineers, the marketing, everyone else in the building looks in terms of what that feedback we receive from our patients, and we make strategic business decisions based on that feedback. So that way, we really make sure this is a big resource that we spend here at Edwards, but we get a great return on engagement from these type of events.
Thank you, Raj. It's fascinating. And I've for the other panelists in the room, the experience of having patients be that deeply involved in an initiative, does that resonate with experiences you've seen as being critical for driving trust in patient engagement? Mandy?
Yes, so I was lucky enough to attend that event, and I was blown away by the warmth of the employees and just the trust that was built in those 2 days. It was a really special experience, and I think events like that go a long way with building trust that's so important for patients.
Thank you, Mandy. Paula, let me hand it over to you for the next question.
Thanks. And this was for Jenny, and we're just wondering what unique needs exist in interacting with patients in the MedTech sector, and what, if anything, restrains patients or MedTech companies from engaging effectively.
Well, MedTech is a broad space. So one unique need, I don't think there's one unique need. It's all from Band-Aids to X-ray machines and everything in between. So there are a lot of unique needs, but to pull some of them up, I think that we talked about measurement or engagement, and you need to be a part of the whole process to really measure what bringing patients into the whole line of development really adds. So measurement, you need to measure HTA, for instance, and if you don't ask the right questions when you set up that, it's hard to get that through whoever's going to pay for it and get it approved. You need that in order, at least in the European space, to get it through MDR, for instance. And as a lot of the MedTech companies are small companies, a lot of startups, they often rely on grants, for instance, and a lot of the institutions are getting a lot tougher on giving these grants to companies that doesn't have everybody sitting around the table. So it's not just a nice to have anymore, it's a need to have in order to do your business. Because whatever you do in bringing patients into the development, it should be good business, because these are small companies or large companies or whatever. It should be good business. It isn't just CSR. It's a really important thing. And I think what's keeping it from actually flying is, I spent a lot of years in the pharma space, and there are a lot of fears. I wouldn't say that it's still a trust issue. I think pharma will struggle with a trust issue for forever and ever, but the MedTech companies, no, they don't have that. They're smaller, they're more agile, and they're like navigating in a gray space so far anyway in how they approach patients. So I think we need to lower that barrier and make sure that the companies or whoever want to bring patients into the development just feels that they can ask anything. And the worst thing that can actually happen is that me or somebody else from the patient space says, you don't have anything to do with that, go away, don't ever come back. So if you're open to getting a no, it shouldn't be a problem, because there's so many people out there that wants to be engaged in development of MedTech. It's a new field, it's an exciting field, and you can be so much more involved than in just developing pharma, because then you have your protocols and it's all very offhand. This is getting into it and getting dirty and really try to create the best solutions. So just ask. We're not dangerous, and we can only say no, but we often say yes.
Thank you, Jenny. And it is interesting because it is a much more iterative process, so people can really truly come along the journey with you. So thank you. Did any of the other panelists want to add anything to that? Can't see any hands, so I'll pass back to you, Brian. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paula. So my next question is for you, Mandy. I was hoping you could elaborate, given your role in Mended Hearts, on how we move patients from initially feeling empowered. How do we get them empowered? But then once they're empowered, how do we move them from being empowered to actually getting involved in the design and the development of medical devices?
Yeah, so it really begins with patients, with education and with training. And, you know, even beyond the training like that UPADI offers in terms of understanding the clinical trial process and the types of different ways that patients can be involved, it really starts at the basics with empowering the patient and making sure that they're a part of the decision-making process. And so we've developed a program similar to this for patients when they're interacting with their healthcare providers and their healthcare providing team. And it's called the 7 Steps to an Empowered Patient. And it starts with educating yourself, being a part of the team, being able to access the info you need, being comfortable voicing your opinions, making informed decisions that are right for you, and knowing your rights as a patient, and then finally taking responsibility for the decision you make. And so I really see this type of 7-step process being applied to the clinical trial decision-making and involvement of patients. So why couldn't we have this, these 7 steps for patients, preparing them for whether they want to be part of a clinical trial, and really empowering them to make those decisions with the company, and so that they don't feel intimidated, so that they know that they have an equal voice in this decision. So it really starts with empowering the patient. And then how you can build that, how you go from that training and that education over to actually getting the patient involved. I think it's twofold. It's having the companies build the trust, like Raj talked about with Edwards and their engagement day, and not just going after the patient when they need them, but actually building that relationship from the ground up, so that when you do need the patient 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road, you've already established a relationship with them, and they know they can trust you. They know that the company cares about hearing your story, about acknowledging your journey, and they want more from you than just to help them make money. And then the other piece is to partner with patient organizations around the world, because we really are the ones that can work with the patients and help you find the patients. And it's not always easy, because it's not even always easy for us to build those relationships in communities. But we are working at it, and we have learned that it's important to go to the patient and not expect the patient to come to you. And the same is true for companies. We have to go to the patient, the communities the patients live in. We need to train those community leaders and work with them and build trust with the community leaders, so that they can then help us build the relationships with the community at large.
Thank you, Mandy. That's great. I was going to ask you exactly how we find those empowered patients, and I think you started to answer it right there. So thoughts to elaborate on that from anyone else on the panel? Any comments to what Mandy shared? Go ahead, Jenny.
I totally agree with Mandy, but I think the hard part when working with MedTech is, again, the small companies. They need to be so fast that they don't really have the time to educate and go well that way. And I think it takes different patients. It takes one patient to be a part of the development process, and it takes another patient to go into the testing phase. So we really need to try and find out how to do that more agile. At least in Sweden, when you turn to a patient organization, it takes way too long to get the patient to join your process, and you have gone 3 steps ahead already, because you can't wait that time. You don't have that money. So I think together we need to find a way to make that process more agile.
Thank you, Jenny. That's a great point. It really is, and unique to this particular space. Any other thoughts on that or color? Okay, Paul, I'll hand it back to you for the next question.
Thanks. So yes, you just mentioned that this is a unique space of MedTech. So Sandra, with your background and your experiences, I was wondering, what are some of the differences between medical device and medical pharma in the medicines development space for engaging and training patients?
It is definitely a great question, Paula. Thanks for that. Yeah, here I have the pleasure to witness and learn firsthand from my colleagues at Roche Pharma. So, and then I mean, for pharma industry, this is a connection and an engagement partnership that happens already for so many years. And one thing that I believe the main difference for us in the MedTech is this long-term view. So it's building this sustainable partnership with patient communities in general. So, and of course, learning from pharma in the way of bringing patients' insights earlier on R&D in terms of needs or in terms of expectations, clinical design, protocol, or most importantly, maintaining this engagement throughout the development cycle. This is something that, I mean, we are in a very good position that we can learn from them. And we, MedTech, and then maybe here can be a bit more specific in the area that we are working, which is in vitro diagnostics. one of the sectors that we are focused. I believe it's a bit more challenging because here it's about blood test or a tissue test, where in most cases it's about tissue sample or it's about blood too. So, and then it's a bit harder to for internally to connect directly with patients and finding where are the opportunities for us to engage. So, and then here, one very big pillar is to build this culture, and then going a little bit on what you mentioned, Raj, is, I mean, on your patient experience day, this is amazing because we're bringing patients closer and their carers closer to us. And then we can both understand the mutual value in doing this type of partnership with advocacy groups. So this is definitely something that is important. So, and then for us, it's important to empower ourselves coming from the industry to initiate and sustain those effective patient engagements. If I may add one point here, and then of course, Jenny, we are in a very good position because there's this excitement from startups, from companies that are developing medical devices in connecting with patient communities. So, and then the opposite, it's of course needed as well from us in giving the right information to patients, organizations, or to advocates about, from the perspective of the medical value or health economics that are related, specifically in our case, to an early diagnosis or an effective disease management approach. So this is something that it's how we are going to work together in making sure that patients, along through the 7 steps Mandy mentioned, making sure that patients and people at risk are able and empowered to self-manage their health.
Thank you, Sandra. Raj.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I mean, I agree with everything Sandra said. I think the other difference, since I spend so much time on the pharma space, I think it's structural. I think I'm learning from the medical device industry is that in pharma, a lot of times we're treating chronic diseases for the most part. Particularly at Edwards, we're curing patients from a heart condition. So sometimes a patient, after they receive one of our devices, they may step away and go, well, I'm no longer a patient. I'm cured, I'm fixed, as opposed to in the pharma space where they're going to be on therapies for sometime the rest of their lives. So there's a different mindset there. And I think the other piece that I'll just say really briefly is in terms of, from my experiences, this is new for the device company to really have the patient's perspective front center, as opposed to the purchaser, which is usually the HCP. So having the HCP in mind as opposed to the patient, I think is going to be kind of a mindset that's going to be changing in the medical device space over a while.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Sandra. And so I think that is important. It's about both sides getting the tools to empower themselves to do this and to see the benefits. So really great. So I'll pass back to Brian.
Thank you, Paula. So the next question we have here is for you, Jenny. Particularly, we're trying to dig into what channels from your perspective are available for patients who are interested in engaging with medical device companies. And what are the benefits for patients to engage with MedTech development? So what's unique about the MedTech space, the opportunities for patients to get involved with medical device companies?
There's so many ways to really get involved in these processes, and there's so many ways out there. You can contact incubators, for instance. They work with a lot of these small companies working on innovation in MedTech, and they would love to work with patients. They have no idea how to reach patients. So if you just reach out, they will be super, super happy. We have trade organizations, for instance, that put the MedTech companies together. They want to educate their companies as well, let them know where they can find patients who are willing to work on MedTech and what the benefits are. All the organizations giving out grants, reach out to them. They would be awesomely happy to work with patients or patient organizations. So there are so many ways to get out there, and if you're willing to reach out, because I think a lot of these organizations don't really know how to find us, the patients. So somebody has to reach out first. Don't be afraid to do that. And the benefits is that you get a stronger product or a process if you bring patients in early on, and we talked about that before. Then it's so much more fun. I think all of us has been a part of these processes, and things come up on the table that a lot of people never thought about before, because we can tweak them in so many different ways and build a stronger product in the end. And how to educate them? Well, we need to reach out and we need to show the good examples, because we've heard about some of the good examples here. We need to show the benefits. And I think that's the way to do it. And once they invite the patient or have a patient at the table, it's a no-brainer. They will understand instantly, and they say, why haven't we done this before? So good examples, get out there, hunt them down, and it will get better. I'm positive of that. I think we've moved ahead in Sweden, and I think it's just staying in there, nagging, and making sure that they understand.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, that makes sense. Have other panelists here had interactions with some of these different MedTech channels? Any experience working with the incubator space that may be worth sharing here? Sandra?
Yes, definitely. And we have incubator programs as well. So, and then I do believe that here it's our role. Our role, meaning from us industry or with the partners that we have in the startup world, but with around us here as part of the PEOF family, that we are empowering them, that we are giving them the tools how to do it. The connections are already here, right? So we know, and then we can navigate in working with them. Definitely, this is something that is very close to our hearts. And then, to be fair, if we really wanted to make sure that we are having solutions that are helping people living better with the conditions that they have, or if we can dream, even that we can work ahead, right? Being able to monitor people earlier and then have the first signs of one condition. So if we could work with around this area, we have to partner with those companies. I mean, they are amazing, and it's about those collective partnerships in the healthcare ecosystem. This is how we will manage.
Thank you, Sandra. Jenny?
Well, I just wanted to add something. I don't think that there's a company out there who doesn't put the patient at the center. I don't want to be a part of the center. I want to be a part of the process. But if you really put the companies on the spot, they have to invite you. I mean, putting the patient at the center and not having a patient reaching out saying, I want to be a part, that's not a good thing.
Thank you, Jenny. That really does resonate. Any other thoughts on this particular topic? All right, Paul, I'm going to hand it back to you.
So Sandra, you started there to sort of talk about, the longer term impacts and things. Can you sort of share how you capture and showcase those impacts, and particularly around the value of engaging with patients early on during the device development, but particularly in your area of expertise around diagnostic solutions?
Yeah, with pleasure. Maybe before going into the how, I would like to touch with the why. So when we think about solutions like remote disease solutions or digital disease management, the main challenge is adoption is the first one, right? It's hard for people to adopt to a new process or a new tool. And then another one that is quite important, it's driving that adherence. So those are key points. And then if a medical device, whatever type, cannot integrate the solution within a patient's lifestyle, so it's very hard that it's going to stay there on a long-term way. So, and then I personally believe that the way to achieve adoption and adherence on the long run is building trust. And then, but building trust, to me, it's inviting patients and their caregivers earlier on at the table, and then really maintaining maintaining the connection with them during the development journey. So this is definitely something that it has to happen. And then even from the inception of the idea and how we are going to identify the unmet medical needs or the specific needs and desires coming from patients. So it's quite key. And then touching into the how, here we were talking a lot about startups, which is a very important component for MedTech industry. So I believe that that's a great benefit in working with them, which is they're super agile, right? So they can quickly iterate, test new ideas or new approaches, and then obviously this brings all of us together. However, then here it's the challenge, how going deeper into or taking the time to collect patients' input, right, along the way. So again, this is I think it's a call to action to all of us here around the table.
Yeah, that's really important to acknowledge. It does take time and it does take resource, but actually you're going to reap the benefits longer term. So it's absolutely worth that investment. And it's great to have these examples. Thank you. Any of the other panel members want to share what they do? Raj.
Yeah, so one additional thought in terms of this early phase development that I think that we can, from an industry perspective, we can do better, and that we can definitely get help from the patient community, is making sure that we have diversity within these clinical trials, within this early development, and that we're reaching communities that very different types that are going to be beneficial from our devices. So I think making sure that we're being very proactive in our thought process to make sure that we're thinking across the globe in terms of who will access, what type of patients will benefit from these as we have these early conversations, I think is really important as well.
That's absolutely critical and fundamental, particularly with devices, because quite often there needs an education element around why and how to use it, how to embed it. So, and to have those perspectives. I sort of recall I have one where it said, oh, it works really well, it's got really good evidence base, but nobody's using it. And I'm like, that doesn't work, does it? So that's great. So Mandy.
Yeah, and the sad thing is, at least for us in the US, is once these devices are on the market, we don't even know if they're available to many communities and many people who really need them the most. We don't know if they don't have a clinic offering a certain type of valve, will that even be an option for them? And so, yeah, Raj, completely agree that that's a great starting point, is to try to get people from all communities in at the very beginning of the process. But then a much bigger issue is making sure everyone has access to the device after it's on the market.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that's not just going to be the US that has that issue, but absolutely it carries through those inequalities if we don't address it early on. Thank you. And back to Brian.
Thank you, Paula. All right, so the next question is for you, Raj. We wanted to go a little bit deeper. You talked about the importance of measuring patient engagement. From your perspective, how should we be thinking about measuring patient engagement in MedTech? And how can you envision using the measurements that we collect as part of this process?
Yeah, thanks for that, Brian. I think that's one of the biggest challenges from an industry perspective. I mean, we're fortunate at Edwards to have a dedicated patient engagement function, but a lot of companies don't have that. And the primary reason I believe that there aren't these dedicated functions within industry is because of resources. And there's not resources because if a company can't measure in terms of the impact of that function won't exist. So I think that having some type of metrics in terms of why do we engage patients? What value can we as an industry get from patient insights? So we have a variety of different measurement tools here, at least at Edwards, where we do get insight from patients and measure those insights. We also have that's publicly facing as part of our foundation, the sustainability report that we share publicly in terms of what is our patient engagement function, what is our patient engagement strategy, and why is important. I think Jenny mentioned in terms of she does as a patient, not to be in the center, but to be a part of the process. And I think having those measurements and having those metrics that we can share in terms of here's the impact, here's the return on engagement that we can show from our industry perspective to our folks in the building here to justify why are we putting additional resources in terms of getting insights and trying to get the perspective from a patient, whether it be work in patient preference studies. These are all very important in terms of being able to have materials that we publish that can be used for our policymakers, for a variety of different stakeholders that we can use as an actual deliverable and say, here's why patient engagement as a function, as a role is important for not just for industry, but is important for overall healthcare. Because we know that the more information, the more informed we are as an industry from our patients, the better we do, the better products that we make. So I think having things like sustainability reports, having metrics, having deliverables that we can share internally as well as externally is vital to have, and I said, a vital health industry.
Thank you for that, Raj. And just building on that a bit further, how important have you found it to leverage case studies, or how difficult has it been to think about case studies as a tool to share some of that impact that you're describing?
Yeah, I think this is very vital as we come up with, for example, in one of my colleagues in patient engagement, one of her big responsibility is developing and doing patient preference research. So once those research and that information is being published, other folks around the community, around the industry can share that. We know that in the US, the FDA is looking for information around that to make decisions on what type of devices get approved, what are the unmet needs, and having that data set, having that research being done is vital in terms of having the accessibility and approval for our devices.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Raj. Any comment or color on what Raj has shared? Okay. Paula, let me hand it back to you. I know we had a couple questions that came up in the chat. Maybe we can address those quickly in the interest of time, and then
Absolutely. Yes, so one of the first ones came in quite early on about using the term empowered, and that can be, it can cause issues because actually people are born with power. We all have power. It's about sort of providing the tools. So I didn't know whether, Mandy, you wanted to come back on that and whether you've sort of come back with had any sort of backlash, as was in the chat, about that terminology.
Yeah, we haven't had any backlash, or we've never had anyone comment on that word. But I guess what it really comes down to is I do feel it's your own empowerment. You can take that back with the amount of, how much you search out information. Knowledge is power. And so most people have the ability to at least do a Google search or start there, and then go to your physician if you are lucky enough to have a physician, a healthcare provider that you can easily access. But really, you can have that empowerment. And I do want to kind of finish on that note that the patient is an equal to their healthcare provider. They're an equal to anyone in industry that they are dealing with. They have the right for a second, third, or fourth opinion, and they have the right to feel comfortable in whatever situation they're in. They know themselves better than anyone. So I think that's where your power comes from.
Absolutely. And I think it all comes back to sort of the terminology as well. It's explaining that actually that is completely well-intentioned, and it is about having equity within the system. And the same with when people, you know, we talked about sort of patient centricity, and it's like, well, lots of people don't identify as patients, so are we excluding that? That's not, it's just about, we have to explain that. So and the other question, which I'll put to the group, is do you believe industry bodies like AdvaMed and MedTech Europe are playing a sufficient role in engaging with patient engagement and advocating for that? Jenny?
Well, they aren't here, are they? So no.
Anyone else have any thoughts? Because these are sorts of things that we could take away from this group, and I'm sort of watching this group map grow as well as we're doing this. So, you know, these are sort of areas we need to get that engagement from. Sandra?
Exactly. And then again, for us on the last bucket here, what could be actions for us? And it's on us, right, to bring them at the table, and then to be closer, and then really showing the power of patient engagement throughout MedTech, medical device industry. So I think here we have a big task and a very important one, another call to action for us.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'll pass back to Brian.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paula. We are going to have a chance to come back to the panelists and share some of the comments that have popped up here and discuss what's in group app, as well as any additional comments in chat. But we wanted to switch just for a second and spend a few minutes talking about some of the resources that are out there, and give our panelists a chance to kind of process what's in group map and see what's there. So I'm going to now share my screen, and we're going to just go through a couple things that are out there that we want to make sure you're aware of as resources here in the MedTech space. So I'm going to start off a little bit from a PFMD perspective, just because there's a series of things that are currently out there that we've been working on. The first one is the working group at PFMD had encouraged us to advance some of the materials that we developed in the pharmaceutical space to be relevant to the MedTech space. So we have adapted what we call the patient engagement quality guidance, which are providing key guidance on the kinds of topics that should be addressed in thinking about and designing patient engagement initiatives. They've been adapted specifically for MedTech with the collaboration of the working group, which is MedTech companies and patient orgs engaged in MedTech. We have another tool called MedTech Synapse, which is thought of often as a LinkedIn for what's going on in the MedTech community. It includes events, people, initiatives, organizations. So we strongly encourage you. It's totally free to register and use it as a place to start sharing and connecting around what's happening here in the MedTech space. We have adapted some of our reference contracts in the pharmaceutical space for engaging and interacting with patients to be MedTech specific. So they are available as tools and templates as you think about the best way to engage with patients. We also have a tool that is in beta right now, which we call the metric selector. So given some of the conversations around the importance of starting to develop measurements for assessing the effectiveness of patient engagement, the metric selector is a continuation of the work that was done by Paradigm to provide a resource for filtering and accessing and developing some initial starting points for what could be measured with respect to patient engagement. And the last one I want to make you aware of specifically is what we have coming up, which is exciting for us. It's the Made for Patients Awards, and you're going to hear a little bit more about this in another slide. But it's a great opportunity to submit initiatives or to identify champions in patient engagement that we will be then looking at and helping to identify people that we can highlight and share with the community. So There are going to be links that my colleague Daniela will be putting in the chat to all of these resources. So you'll be able to click directly in and find each one of them. So I really encourage you to check them out. We'll be looking for where else we can develop resources going forward, but this is a great starting point that was driven by the MedTech community we collaborated with. So the next piece I want to share with you is a little bit more targeted and also very exciting from our perspective. Those of you who know, we have developed a patient engagement training program for pharmaceuticals. We were asked to also adapt this patient engagement training program for the medical device space. So the working group has just launched several weeks ago our patient engagement training for MedTech. It is available through the Synapse platform. And again, the links will be put into chat. It is free right now. So you'll be able to go in, and it's a great place to begin the process of learning about what patient engagement means and also sharing the resource with others to tackle this issue around increasing awareness of patient engagement in the MedTech space, what it looks like and how you can get involved. It's about 45 minutes. So it's not extremely long. It's very accessible. So we really encourage you to check it out or share it within your communities for those who'd like to go deeper and really understand what patient engagement looks like in the medical device space. I'm going to pass it back to Paula now, who's got a few things to share as well.
Thank you, Brian. So yes, I've been sort of privileged to be working with UPATI on parallel training for patients, the patient community around MedTech. And many of you may be aware, UPATI have their fellowship program, which has been sort of a long course and quite in-depth, which has been fantastic. But what they've done more recently, based on feedback, is they've made it more of there's an open classroom. So it's free for anybody to access, and you can dip in and out of the different modules. There's a whole range of modules. MedTech is just one of them. And you can see here, it's got 4 components: introduction and history of medical devices. It was an amazing journey to go on to develop this. Regulations and a roadmap, very conscious there's a roadmap available for where patient engagement can happen in medicines development. It's quite a different roadmap for MedTech, much more iterative, and it's a really useful resource that's been brought about. How patient engagement can take part in market access and the health technology assessment elements. And what's really nice is that actually this is, as I say, you can take it in any order, pick it up, put it down as you want. But actually, hopefully, a lot of the information, particularly around regulatory, got into a lot of in-depth information that is also incredibly accessible. And it's not just text heavy, there's lots of examples. And so the link's there for you, and Daniela will put it in the link. Just want to say a big thank you to the consortia that pulled this module together. It were UPATI Fellows, Medtronic, ourselves at Oxford University, University of Milan providing the academic perspectives, patients providing their perspectives, organisations like Devices for Dignity, who've done an awful lot in this space in the UK, and many, many more, and apologies for anyone I've missed out. But hopefully we've been able to bring this subject to life with lots of examples, and that module is going to continue to reiterate and evolve, which brings me nicely on to the next bit, which links back to what Brian was saying about the Made with Patients Awards. So we're really pleased to announce these first global awards celebrating excellence in patient engagement, with specifically looking for MedTech cases. And for you to nominate your patient engagement champions. So again, the link's in the chat, and if you access the link, there's a button to nominate. If you go on there, you can search for initiatives, so you can put keywords in like MedTech or a company name or an individual's name. If nothing comes up in the search, scroll down a bit further, there's another button, and you can add an initiative. It's a very straightforward form. And it's great. We've heard from the panel throughout. We've had Raj's secret sauce, the patient engagement, Edward's Insights Day, and how amazing, what a fantastic initiative that others can be learning from. And we've heard from Jenny the importance of having more of these great examples so people can feel empowered to do that, to try them and to link up with people that have done it before. So please do get your nominations in, highlight anything you want to us, and the awards we made on the 14th of June at the Patient Engagement Open Forum. Thank you. Brian, you're mute.
Danielle, I believe you're going to put group map back up for us. Okay, let me see if I can put it up.
There it is.
Great, thank you. So for this portion of it, the closing section, we wanted to bring it back to the panel, but specifically around the kinds of things that you've shared here on the group map. So we can just start with the top left-hand corner. I'm not sure if the panelists have had a chance to review this, but these are organized based upon how popular they are. So people have been liking them. So at the very top of this channel here, it's how and why should we be measuring patient engagement in MedTech? So people are really responding around, without patient engagement or patient involvement right from the very beginning, the quality is low, right? And I believe the second comment also digs into that point that it's critical in the design phase to be measuring and monitoring patient engagement from the very, very beginning so that we can see the impact and start to measure and speak about the impact that the patients are having as part of this process. Does that resonate with the panel as being relevant in this space? Yeah, Jenny?
Well, it's exactly what we've been talking about, right? To get the best product, we need to pull everybody in at the beginning. So it's a no-brainer.
Yes, so that does make sense. It says here, there's no point in producing MedTech without patient involvement. Our leaders need to be convinced that patient engagement works and merits investment. This seems to be a common theme that we see that's, I don't know if it's unique to the MedTech space, but as you think about that, Raj, as you think about the success you've had in driving patient engagement all the way up to the point of sustainability, can you comment on how critical that top level support has been for Edwards in really driving MedTech across the organization?
Yeah, I mean, we've been fortunate to have a leader in our CEO that this has been part of his mission from the beginning. And I think you have to have that top buy-in from your most senior leadership, but also you have to have the folks that can execute on that CEO's vision. And Edwards has been fortunate to have really strong individuals within our building that believe in patient engagement and can execute on patient engagement. So having that most senior leader kind of live and breathe that, and then having people under him to be able to execute it is key.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. Moving on here, how do we build trust and awareness to move patients from empowered to engaged? At the very top of this, we see people discussing, fair remuneration of patient engagements in MedTech. I remember having some conversations with several of you earlier about the differences between patient involvement in MedTech versus pharma, and that one of them tends to be much more regulated about the way you engage with patients, and the other tends to be a little bit more open. Does that translate through to remuneration as well? Do you see the importance of remuneration being equally important, if not more important, in the MedTech space? Go ahead, Jenny.
I think it's equally important, and that it shouldn't be a difference. It is easier within the MedTech space because we aren't that regulated, but it shouldn't be a difference where you are a part of the process. The hard part is finding the level of that remuneration, because that's the discussion, not if we should be remunerated, but how much. And that's often an affected discussion, because patient isn't a profession. I have a profession that I actually work with, and patient is something that I am when I'm at the doctor's office. So that's the tough part. And going back to the startups, they don't have the money to actually pay patients for being a part of this. So then we comes back to the grant organizations. Could there be a grant, for instance, for small companies to pull patients into the process, for instance? That would make it easier. But it's a tough discussion, and it's been going on for forever and ever. But I can take time off from my work to go into a development process on my holiday. That doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
So we need to try and find out the solution for this as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sandra, and then you, Mandy.
Yeah, finding that the right level of remuneration is something that it has to be taken extremely serious, because we see a patient or a carer or a family member. I mean, there are so many different levels of expertise and where this person is acting, what is the role, and which type of areas. I mean, are we talking about HTAs, or are we talking about policy shaping topics, or it's really about technology, right? Being able to give an input, which it goes beyond the experience. So definitely there's a need to have this mapping, and then being clear about the different, if I may say, personas within this spectrum of remunerating patients. Definitely it is. I would like to make a comment on what you said, Jenny, and then indeed for startups, it's extremely hard. So it's hard for them to raise funds to start their development or the earlier stage. So imagine having to put more investment on that. And this is why having the partners, talking about us at Roche Diagnostics, as we have an accelerator program. So it's really on us for the startups that are part of our programs, and introducing the opportunity, bringing them earlier on this process, and then see what we can do to jointly get it done. And then one thing that it's extremely important is about, okay, the timing of collecting the input. Depending on the stage of the development of a certain medical device, it's already ongoing. Sometimes it's harder and harder to get something changed. So again, as early as possible, being able to get patient insights, in the end, we can save resources.
Thank you, Sandra. Mandy?
And I just wanted to comment on when we were talking before about trying to reach all different types of communities, and keeping in mind the needs of those communities, that if you want to engage people in clinical trials and properly remunerating them for that, you have to think about childcare. You have to think about the fact that people are maybe working 1 or 2 jobs, and that if you're asking them to take 2 hours out of their day, you need to properly acknowledge that. And travel costs if it's not virtual, if it's in person. So there are a lot of levels to think about properly making sure people are remunerated.
No, absolutely. I think that makes sense. You know, the second comment here caught my eye too. Having end-to-end engagement, including feedback on how inputs have been used and why they haven't, right? So sort of the follow through it. If we do have end-to-end engagement and we get them involved early, it sort of ties into this need around being able to communicate that, right? Communicate the impact that the patients are having through the process. I see, I see another question here. It's in the open-ended section, but it's got 5 votes. It's drilling into the fact that caregivers and patients have different needs and wants. So as we think about the caregivers in the MedTech environment in particular, how do you see us educating and engaging with caregivers to advance patient engagement, given that sort of the unique importance of caregivers for the MedTech pipeline? Go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, I mean, I learned through our patient experience in terms of the importance of caregivers when we're watching them, the responsibility that they have with their loved one and how involved they are in all the decisions being made for that loved one. A lot of times as an industry, they may be an afterthought, but I think that's a huge mistake if we are not considered in terms of the way and how that we develop devices and how we reach out to patients with not taking into consideration the caregiver. I also think that we as an industry can probably do even a better job of providing education for caregivers specifically, because sometimes that caregiver is the one that is making a lot of those decisions for that patient. So I agree. I think caregivers are a huge part of our engagement with patients.
Mm-hmm. Any other color on that? If not, another question kind of caught my eye in the same category around the importance of HTA organizations, right? As we think about the unique MedTech space, what does that say to you as practitioners in this space? What do you think the role is uniquely of HTA organizations? Nothing jumps, so we can move to the next one. We see remuneration come up here again. Moving back to how do we build trust and awareness, as sort of a key topic for discussion. The next one here is provide a range of opportunities for people to be engaged. So when you think about that, do you see the need for a broader range of opportunities for engagement in the MedTech space? Do you feel like it's very similar to the pharma space? And from your experience, what are some of those opportunities to be engaged? We heard about the Patient Experience Day, but have you seen some other unique channels for patients to get engaged, to build the kind of trust, to really understand what it means to engage with a medical device company? Go ahead, Paula, and then.
So I was just going to say that, with COVID and the pandemic, we had to sort of equip people with the diagnostic testing is in the community. And so a lot of that was done out with community groups through faith leaders, and used video content and very different formats to show people that these were safe to use and how to use them and how to get the best from them, what to do with the results. So that was just one example.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Paul. I don't know who is next, but Jenny, let's go with you, and then you, Mandy.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen any great initiatives. I think we've tried in Sweden at least to partner up with Upati and Upati Sweden and lend our network to them in order to teach our community the best ways of working together with patients. And so we share the same space. I think that could be one way of doing it, and we reach two communities at the same time. It's been beneficial for both of us.
Excellent. Mandy.
Yeah, before COVID, and I think now after COVID, we're seeing more of our partners engage at a local level with our chapters in terms of getting out there and speaking at their meetings, because I think it's really important to meet in person and to build those connections in person if you're able to do it. And then you get to see that there are people on both ends and a relationship's developed. So just getting the information out there face to face.
Thank you, Mandy. I'm looking through chat here. I just see a recent question about the challenge, or the challenge that startups should be budgeting for patient involvement from the beginning and raising funds accordingly, which is sort of an interesting idea. As we think about the challenge for a startup to engage patients, what do you guys think about this suggestion that from the very beginning, funders should be looking for patient engagement and patient involvement in early design. Does this resonate?
Definitely. And then working within this space and then bringing awareness and then changing the mindset and the culture about it's a one-on-one sometimes for the startup world. So, and then if we are able to be part of those conversations, to participate on the forums where the investors are coming together. So this might come from the investors as well, the big investors that are working with those startups. So, and then here it might be an opportunity for us as a community to spread ourselves and start engaging earlier and then talking about this mindset shift in bringing patients earlier in this environment as well.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on that as an opportunity or a unique challenge in the MedTech space? Okay, so I'm looking back here through some of the questions that are here in chat as well. There's a question around culture and the impact of culture with respect to patient engagement. And I'm not 100% sure of the definition of culture in this question, but as we think about the culture of patients in the MedTech space, what does that feel like and how different is it than the culture within a pharmaceutical space? It could be gender, it could be the profile or demographic of a typical patient to get involved in patient engagement. Do you see differences there that are worth thinking and drilling down on as we think about pulling out and adapting to the culture of MedTech? I don't know if your hand is up, Mandy, or if it was just, okay, go ahead, yes.
So I'm not going to, if it's okay, Brian, I'm not going to compare the two between MedTech and Pharma, but I did want to, I think I took it to mean culture is, and how do you get people who may feel uncomfortable or not even understanding their own story because their culture, you know, it's just the way they've grown up. But I just wanted to say, this is where the importance of peer-to-peer support really comes through, because if you have another person who's talking to you, who's from your culture, who's walked the same journey that you've walked, I think at that point, maybe the patient becomes more comfortable telling their story and maybe realizing where they can become stronger, more empowered in their journey by talking to someone else who's walked that same path and who's maybe a little further along in their journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Jenny.
Well, I think that the culture is different. And I think that a part of it is the wide spectrum of MedTech. A pharma company develops compounds. I mean, that's what they do. And they do some tools together with those compounds. But as a MedTech company, the innovation can come from so many different angles. It could be a nurse on the floor that actually finds out this innovation. And from her perspective, she just wants to make her life easier. So that's the top of mind for her. So maybe that we need that culture change in order for her to tweak her innovation. And then it can feel more than one purpose, not just make her life easier, but also the patient's life easier. So I think the broad spectrum and the way that the innovations come to life is a part of the difference in the culture.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. I love that. There's another question here, or not a question, but a comment about the need to inform and educate both patients, advocates, and healthcare professionals. You know, so picking up on our earlier thinking around the importance of the healthcare professional in this particular space. Have you seen, or do you have thoughts about the best way to educate healthcare professionals and what that might look like in this particular space? Go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, so obviously healthcare professionals are a key stakeholder in this space. They're the ones a lot of times are making the decisions in terms of which devices are going to be placed inside of patients or which device they're going to use. So I think having clinically relevant education, but also I think patients can play a role in that as well. And when I think of patients, I'm thinking patient advocacy organizations. So I think that patient advocacy organizations have such a strong role, and to be able to reach directly out to a physician and other physician societies. I think there's a connection, there's a partnership where I've seen, at least in the pharma space, is where you can have medical societies work directly with patient advocacy groups in terms of making sure that the physician sees the perspective of the patient. So they're not just getting it in from their patient that they see in front of them, but they're getting a broad range from partnering with these advocacy communities.
Thank you, Raj. Sandra.
Raj, I'll try to complement what you said because I fully agree with you. What is being developed, we see in so many different shapes and forms. It's clinical decision support tools that are meant, developed for clinicians or for the healthcare team, which is definitely amazing with the amount of information that we are overloaded, or them are overloaded every day. And then here, our role within our different partnerships, it's thinking about the shared decision support, right? How those type of tools would include patients, or it would include family members that are being part of his or her care. So, and then here, the partnership with patient advocacy groups, to your point, Raj, it is totally key. How we are going to bring those two pieces together, because one doesn't move without the other one.
Thank you, Sandra. I love that. One more question here. And then we may try to hit a few here in the chat. There's a ton of conversation going on in the chat. We may not be catching it all, but we will capture it. There's a comment here around if patients are engaged early for a long-term project, they may need help to understand the time gaps between stages so they don't feel abandoned. You know, this is an interesting comment because I think the time frames of development in MedTech and pharma may be different. And maybe there's a different relationship we have with the patients, given those differences in time frames. Do you see any kind of any unique characteristics of the development cycle for a medical device vis-a-vis a pharma device that change the kind of relationship that we need to have with that patient over time? Go ahead, Jenny.
Well, as you develop a medical device, you iterate that medical device over time. And when you develop a compound, you develop the compound, it can get more indications, but it's the same compound. So that's the way it's a bit different. The MedTech development process goes back and forth over time, and hopefully it never ends until you throw the device in the trash. And that's the biggest difference.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you, Jenny. So we have about 8 minutes left. I want to give a chance for the panelists to make any final comments if they'd like about patient engagement and final takeaways that they'd like to share. It's not required, but I'll kind of go around the room and give you a chance to put in a final say before we wrap up. Does anyone want to start with final comments? Go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, first of all, this is an amazing forum for us to be able to speak directly to patients. I appreciate it. But I'm glad that we have a variety of folks on the panel. And I think it's important in terms of collaboration to be able to share insights. I think the more that we as industry and patients and community and advocacy organizations can share in terms of what we're learning, we can move patient engagement forward. I know it's a little bit behind from the pharma space, but I think the more that we share our insights, the further that we can move, the faster that we can move.
Thank you, Raj. Mandy.
Yeah, I just want to say that it's such a relief to be having these discussions as I said, I've been with Men at Hearts for 11 years, and we were not having these discussions 11 years ago. This is just something that started over the last probably 2 to 3 years for us anyway. And I'm excited to see where it goes and how we can get our patients and members involved.
Thank you, Mandy. Sandra.
I really love the discussions we have and how diverse we are as a community at PEOF. And I really wish to see more diversity here, and then looking here for the unique stakeholders that could play a major role. So I really wish that in the years to come, we will add one more of this so important stakeholder at the table to enrich our discussions.
Thank you, Sandra, very much. Any other final comments? Jenny?
Yeah, I also want to add to what all the other people said. What an amazing discussion. And I think that the only thing that we all can agree on is that we have to do this together. It's not only about pulling the patient into the process, it's about making the process make sense all throughout the way. And if I'm to give one send off, it's just to ask. Don't be afraid to ask. It's not hard to ask. It's not dangerous to ask. We don't bite. So please ask and make sure that we have more networks and meetings like this when we can raise these questions, because we are moving ahead. As Mandy said, it's a whole different world today than it was 5 years ago, but there's still a way to go.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jenny, for that. All right, I'm just going to throw up a final slide. I really would also like to thank all the panelists and my co-moderator Paula for the time today. It's been wonderful to get to know you over the past couple of weeks as we discussed the discussion for today. I'm really impressed by the work that you're all doing. So thank you for coming today. Thank you, all of you out there, for your engagement. I'm really impressed with the amount of content that's in chat. So we will capture and try to get back to the questions that we were not able to address today in the panel, but your thoughts will not get lost. Just sharing a final screen as we close here. We will be collecting all of the chat, as I'd mentioned. We will be providing a copy, recorded copy of this session that will be available on the PEOF website. And the group map that you've been providing insight on will remain open for a short time after this. So you'll be able to review it and add any additional thoughts. And then, of course, we will capture the results from the group map and share them back out. Finally, there will be a survey that comes out following this, where we'll be asking for your feedback on the session, things that we could adapt or do differently as we continue to evolve and grow PEOF. So thank you all for the time you participated with today, and thank you to the panel once again. And with that, I will close the session for today.